よー少年稼いでるかい
Okay, so we opened this week with Taya meeting a guy who thankfully wasn't his dad, but rather the CEO of a big tech corporation, Raita Naito, and was apparently the man who inspired him to get into the career business as a bit of a mentor figure. Thus, he kind of owed him a thing or two, so of course he was willing to take a job from a guy who ran a big company that had some very important intel like a doll that he wanted to deliver to a kid in a hospital.
世界に一つだけのぬいぐるみを作ったんだ
Nah, but seriously, it is always nice to see a superhero doing even a simple little deed for someone who could be seen as a member of their target audience. It is especially nice as it was essentially a Make-A-Wish kid who Taya was more than willing to do for the price of just a smile, while the actual payment he would have received, he instead had Naito donate to feed kids in starving countries. Yeah, it's cheesy as all hell, but damn if it isn't wholesome. But still, I guess we do have to balance things out, so why don't we introduce a new slimy evil general, and of course a creepy dude in charge of forcibly modifying other people's bodies would be voiced by the same VA who did Orochimaru. Hey, as long as he doesn't become a comedic jobber by the end of all this. Seriously, that was one of the main reasons why I stopped watching Naruto. You know, on top of Talk No Jutsu. Thankfully, most of the comedy was still coming from our original trio of baddies, while Dr. Cannon was just being very unsettling. Seriously, this guy has some very expressive suit acting, so good job there, I guess. Anyway, they created an antenna monster this week who actually had a pretty strong ability that let him remotely control anyone he had stuck an antenna on. With it, he made the poor civilians commit the worst atrocity possible, doing a Super Sentai dance! No, don't do the Q Ranger dance, or else you're gonna get complaints for doing pelvic thrusts! Yeah, that was a thing, look it up. Okay, but seriously, losing control of your own body would be horrifying no matter how silly the activity, and he did eventually have them do something far more devious and sick them on the Boonboomger, who had arrived to help. This led into a really good action scene, with the major highlight being the actual morphing sequence of all things. As because they were being attacked from all sides between the usual grunts and the civilians who they couldn't harm, they actually had to think of creative ways of performing their transformations whilst fending off everyone. It was easily, in my opinion, one of the best sequences in this whole show so far, with each character doing their own creative take on how to pull off their transformations, whilst landing a few good hits on the grunts. It was so good, it got applause from the Hashuran, which the action director deserved, especially after all the years of work he had put into this franchise on and off the camera. Yeah, interestingly, the fights of this and last week's were directed by a former suit actor, Jun Watanabe. For Super Sentai, he actually made his big break as Gohan Gold, which was appropriate considering what's happening next week with this show getting a much better crossover. Though he probably was more prominent as a Kamen Rider, especially during Phase 2 of the Heisei era, where he played a bunch of secondary, and even once a main rider in Saber. He probably could have gone on to play the rest of the main riders for the Reiwa era, but I think he might have retired from suit acting, as he hasn't done it since, and instead seems to have shifted into directing. Probably for the best, as maybe he was getting a little beat up, and he did have a child during his final years of acting. Man, hey, if he can continue to give us more scenes like this, he can hang up the spandex permanently for all I care.
That is not spandex!
Anyway, Taya was late to the action due to his meeting with Naito, and he would also have to delay his delivery when he learned what was going on, which the CEO gave him the okay because while he didn't know what was going on, he trusted Taya. Again, this stuff is way too wholesome for me. Still, it didn't seem like he'd be needed, as the team managed to break the monster's antenna and free the civilians, so yeah, battle over, right? Well... Again, the Orochimaru comparisons were way too appropriate, as he'd even modified the monster with a snake-like appendage coming out from, well, you see it too, right?
That's a pin.
As a result, the already dangerous monster got a serious upgrade that made him a lot stronger, and even capable of controlling our heroes. He managed to get everyone except Gemba, who he then sicked his teammates on. And again, these were just awesome action scenes, not just for the great camera angles and wire work, but just the fact that we were seeing our heroes fight each other, not because they wanted to, or even because they were being brainwashed, but rather because they had no control over their bodies. Oh, but when the Precure do it, they have to totally ban them from ever doing it again. Seriously, I'm looking forward to reviewing that movie. But yeah, Tai eventually joined the fight, and I actually liked the fact that he and Gamba were on the losing side. It made sense as not only were the numbers against them, but they also needed to hold back. I mean, they might have won if they had gone all out, but you can't do that against friends, and they didn't have the skills to compensate for pulling their punches. Fortunately though, they found a pretty clever workaround.
Alright.
Oh, of course! Drain the batteries on these things! Well, actually, these kind of take a little while, so that might be a bit much, so... Nah, but seriously, because the changers were linked when they activated their finishers, they send out digital signals that interfere with the monsters, kind of like trying to use your phone in the middle of a busy city. So after some finisher spamming that would make Kamen Rider double proud, they broke the monster's connections and were able to finish him off. The resulting big robot fight was relatively a little more typical, at least compared with the rest of the episode, which was still a high bar, and they did use a clever tactic in using a smoke bomb to get in a sneak attack. And again, this episode has already delivered a ton of great action, so it doesn't even really matter. And with that, the episode ended with Taya making his delivery, of course in full costume, because you really shouldn't cheap out on these sorts of things for the sick kids. This was a simple yet great episode for introducing the new general of this next arc. The main plot of Taya delivering the plushie was simple yet touching, but of course the main draw, especially for a show like this, was the action that was brilliantly done. Which I guess was appropriate for this new villain, who did come off as very smart and intimidating, especially if you're afraid of snakes. Dr. Cannon, on top of having another great design that really got across the idea that he's a mad scientist, also seemed to have an effective skill set as, unlike Unhappy Rex, he was more of a schemer than a brute, letting others do the dirty work for him after he's made a few adjustments without their consent. It's already proven to be an effective tactic, as they even came close to having the Boonboomger destroy themselves had it not been for a convenient yet clever hack that they literally had on hand. Hell, even before the monster's doping kicked in, the episode did a great job getting in some really good action scenes of our heroes fending off monsters and civilians alike. Watanabe just did a great job throughout, as much like the characters he played, he knows it's all about the style and getting that across through the character's actions. Easily some of my favorite action of the season so far, especially with the dramatic setup of having the heroes fight each other. Meanwhile, the main story, while again simple, did nicely strike at the core of what Super Sentai is about and who they're trying to appeal to, so I really can't complain. Plus Naito seems like an interesting side character who I wouldn't mind seeing again in the show. And overall, this was an effective introduction to a new villain with some amazing action. And if anything, at least this version of the snake ninja scientist is obsessed with one of the most annoying edgelords in all of anime. If you haven't seen it yet, we managed to get up a review for the first Precure Max Heart movie, which, according to some of y'all's comments, apparently you did kind of forget was a thing. Yeah, for the first film in such a long-running magical girl franchise, it's kind of forgotten about, for good reason, as it is pretty mid. Still, if you want to hear our full thoughts about it, do check out the review, as well as the Max Heart reviews that will continue very soon. So look forward to it. Until then though, for our Konami fans, be sure to wish your mothers a happy Mother's Day, if this manages to get up on Sunday. And also, damn it, who forgot to pay the cable bill?